What's up, everybody? We are back, Midjourney Fast Hours podcast, and we're doing something a little bit different today. We've got Rory Flynn, of course. We've got myself, of course, but we've also got a legend here by the name of Chris Branch, who's going to introduce himself here in a second. And Chris, you're our first guest on the show. Me and Rory obviously have known you for quite a bit. You've got a ton of great information that I feel like you can share with our audience. So we're excited to have you today. Why don't you just go ahead and give everybody a quick introduction of yourself and just kind of set the scene for us?
I really appreciate being the first guest, guys. That's awesome. What an honor. My name is Chris, and I founded a creative agency called Seedily about 6 years ago. And about 3 or 4 years ago, when we first started getting involved in generative AI, I founded a community through LinkedIn, and we called this Artificial Inspiration. And actually, Rory was one of the first people that we curated because, standout examples of using the AI workflows that we wanted to encourage our community about, educate them on how they work, and democratize creativity. That was really the outset of Artificial Inspiration, is that we knew AI was going to enable a whole bunch of people without a creative background in order to be creative, and that we wanted to just inspire them along the way about, trying different tools and trying different workflows. And Rory always came out with such unique ones that he made our top 5 curated lists. And that community's been going about 2 years now, and it's 200,000 people strong now almost, which is crazy that it's growing so fast.
Insane, because we all kind of got a little bit of our, I think, Midjourney start, or we utilized the LinkedIn platform mostly, or heavily, if nothing else, with Midjourney. Mm-hmm. Chris, you were one of the first. Rory, you were one of the first. Both of you guys were 2 of the first that I saw really doing that. But it was an awesome opportunity, right? Because no one was talking about Midjourney. Nobody was talking about AI image gen. It was just everybody was talking about ChatGPT, LLMs. What can you do with AI? That was AI, but not everybody was talking about sort of this component of taking something from text and turning it into an image.
Totally. And Chris is being very humble, everyone, by the way. If you were on LinkedIn at, a certain point, and I remember when I started poking around, looking at content, and I was like, oh, this stuff just kept popping and catching my eye because it looked like professional advertising done by AI. Now, when I saw the title and it was Artificial Inspiration, I'm like, who the hell is this? And then saw that it had I don't know, at the time, maybe 75,000 followers. I'm like, what the hell? How long have they been doing this? So,
right.
Naturally, you kind of do your, because you can stalk on LinkedIn fairly easily. Found Chris. I was like, oh, what's Chris doing? Then I found Paul, and I'm like, oh, your partner Paul. And I was like, oh, these guys are legit. But there's an actual background here. So, I think that was interesting because it wasn't just, someone that was an opportunist coming to just take over this AI space. You guys had experience in the advertising space, the creative space. So that's definitely want to get into a little bit of that. What did you guys do before this? And what was the impetus? Midjourney, AI, that's what I'm doing.
That's actually a really good point. I never really appreciated until we were, talking even recently how right place, right time we were. Because as a creative agency prior to the AI boom, we were just doing things the old school manual way, but we were delivering exactly the type of things that we would later deliver with AI. So, the things that would take a month in Photoshop to create motion graphics or something like this, instead we were doing this in 2 to 3 days with AI. By the way, I'll give you more credit because you were actually much better at doing the social spread. I noticed that you were popping up on X and Instagram.
Thanks,
and Reddit and everywhere else like this, and social media is so complicated to me that I can't even imagine trying to dominate in 6 or 7 of them. So I just went all eggs in on LinkedIn, and actually Paul did some good work on Instagram on his personal, but I didn't really get involved in that community. I just wanted to make sure that I knew how to grow a community organically on one of them, because they're so difficult to learn inside out, to the degree in which you need to get it big enough to make business sense for you. So again, with Artificial Inspiration, this was actually our 17th LinkedIn community that we'd opened. So really well positioned at that time to know how they grow, why they grow, all of the things to do in order to make them grow, like the formats to post in, the times in which to post in, all of this other stuff. So yeah, the advertising agency side of things, though, was a very interesting moment in time where Midjourney reached out to us, actually. They actually sent us an email saying, we appreciate your creative agency's portfolio of work, and we would like to give you early access of this tool for free in order for you to basically do the human level feedback that they required to release the next model. And I didn't realize at the time, but what a genius move for Midjourney to literally pick portfolios of work where they can trust they know composition, they can trust they know advertising and other things, instead of just usual public users that would give feedback that wouldn't come from an advertising background or a graphic design background. So that's how we did get involved initially. Is can't give us too much credit. They reached out to us, and then we had a little tinkle away with it and said, well, this is nothing yet, but given 6 months, this could change everything. And here we are.
Drew and I have mentioned this a few times. The shadow organization that is Midjourney. We did a human reach out to you, or was it like info@Midjourney reach out to you? Because we don't know who works there other than David. Like it's like a mystery.
No, that's a great point. It wasn't David himself. It was one of the mods on the early servers of Discord, and I wasn't so attuned with Discord because I hadn't been following big gaming YouTubers or what other reason there was to be on Discord prior to the Gen AI stuff.
NFTs.
Yeah, I didn't get involved in NFTs either, so I was basically like, what's this Discord thing? And, then I thought, oh, this sounds really dodgy. Almost ignored it, to be honest, because it was such like a random reach out to my email from a non-founder mod of this AI platform that I'd never heard of. In hindsight, so glad I didn't ignore that email, because obviously then getting really early access to it, we were like, oh, okay, we can learn and grow as it grows, and then every single version of Midjourney that's come out, we've advanced with the tool. And we were just talking in the green room, some people get left behind on every single iteration,
Very true.
I remember specifically the version 4 to 5 jump, and this is getting right into the weeds here because I know you guys are really into the Midjourney stuff. So we went from digital art print to photorealism, didn't we? And I noticed that out of the raw model, without the sort of keywords given to it, lost that magical feel for some people. When it started to all look like raw photography instead of digital art prints, they sort of dropped off in huge numbers there. But now we're talking about 6 and beyond, where you're taking it into image to video and storytelling, much bigger drop off than the digital art to photorealism print stuff. Everyone's sort of getting up to their capabilities and then sticking to their guns when it comes to that sort of thing, I'm noticing now.
Chris, when did you guys get into Midjourney? What version was that? Just tell our audience. I'm curious.
It was between 1 and 2.
Man.
We had... Yeah, we had...
Nightmare
You're the
Fuel
only
stuff.
one I know. You're the only one I know that was in there at 1 and 2. That's insane.
Yeah, so we have some screenshots from version 1, which was February of 2022 or something like this. And my God, did it look like a cancerous pus. I can't even tell you how warped the thing... the first prompt I tried to do was a Spider-Man Adidas shoe. Because I'd come from loving kicks and designing kicks prior to the AI stuff. So that was my first prompt. It barely looked recognizable as a shoe or as a spiderweb. It was just some mess of these two rough things, in a blob, which you would call generation 1. And we've done one in version 2, one in version 3, one in version 4, 5, 6. And the progress is just, in our workshops, people can't believe it. They can't believe that we stuck around since the early days, considering what version 1 looked like. But that's the sort of gamble you take on, well, this is going to rapidly get better. What I didn't predict is the boom that we're going through in video right now. I thought video would take a lot longer, to be honest with you, than the photorealism of just images. And now I'm really shocked. I even was quoted famously as saying it might take 3 to 5 years for this AI video stuff to be as good as the image stuff. And that was 6 months ago. So now I feel stupid.
It's crazy. I mean,
definitely.
It's wild because I feel like video it's still one of those things because photography and images are static.
Exactly.
I think there's a little bit more of a give and take that you're willing to take with some of those things. And when you're early on something, you almost have to see the bigger picture to continue to embrace it and adopt it, right? And I think that's sort of been the eye-opening thing for me with video, is seeing how many people have been in on video early and still going through the motions with it, even when it was extremely bad, right?
Totally.
Because again, different between a static photo and movement throughout a scene.
You want to know what's interesting
Much
about that,
different.
Drew? Is that what kept me hooked? I think it's the same thing that kept me hooked on Midjourney was the outlier generations, not the ones that happen consistently. It's like the random ones that are really good, and you're like,
Yeah.
all right. Like when I would do this on Runway Gen 2 specifically, you'd have a lot of really slow, really not a lot of movement, and then out of nowhere you'd get one that just worked. And it was like, we were talking about this in the green room also, was this bird. I did a bird that went, it's a stupid video. I just showed motion brush and how I did this bird. And the bird had this really natural motion. It was fast, and it fluffed its wings. And if, no one knew that artificial intelligence existed, you would not know that was not a real bird. And it was just like that one got me hooked. And I was like, this can only get better. It's not like everything else is the same, right? Same thing with Midjourney. Like, version 4, you'd get something that was wild, and you're like, "Damn! All right, there's a lot more to come." You guys probably saw that in version, I'm guessing 3. 2 still seemed like nightmare fuel to me.
It's so funny you said that too, because one of the themes that me and Andrew have on the In AI Nutshell podcast we do for Spotify and YouTube is that we're in this like quality versus control era. The competing tools that each start, DALL-E 3 has a lot more prompt coherence, but doesn't give you that raw quality from now and then that makes you go, whoa, like Midjourney does, like you're saying with that outlier where you go, holy God, that looks straight out of a digital art print. Or that looks like a real movie scene, or my God, that one in 100 generations just wows me. So I've always been like that with my picking of all of the technologies, because in the music space right now, Suno has a lot more control, but Udio has that raw output quality that when you get it, it's like, gives me goosebumps. And that's really why I do it, because I think uniquely music generations added to the motion and all of this stuff together. We've got Gen AI MTV around the corner now. We really needed that last piece of the puzzle, which was as good a beat creations as we're getting image and video and motion and all that stuff. The next thing we need is really, really good voice, like singing. But I've heard that 11 Labs is teasing their music product soon, and obviously we know those guys for voices, so they're probably best placed in order to add the voices on top of like a Suno or Udio beat, and then bingo bango, you've got the full MTV experience. It's nuts, isn't it?
You might need to create a page for that Gen AI MTV right now. That sounds dope.
Now.
We bought generativebeats.com, the domain,
Dude.
because I thought this is going to be huge. Because I've been following will.i.am quite religiously, and he's one of the early investors.
He's Udio, right?
In Udio, yeah. And I seen him open up like a digital 24/7 generative radio station the other day, and I thought, naturally, right, with millions more people generating beats, they've got to sit somewhere, and be distributed somewhere. So I'm seeing business models popping up in this space, and honestly, guys, nothing unites people like music. Art's cool, and I love it. Advertising, amazing. Music, there's no culture that's ever lived without it. There's like
100%.
a difference there with music. So like, I know that music will kick off with the combination of video and everything else. It's an exciting time, man.
It's really cool, and I think Chris and I, we teamed up on a track, if you want to call it that, when I was just getting into Suno, and I was like, dude, this is so awesome, because Chris has some DJing background for those who don't know, and we kind of hit it off over some of the music choices that we enjoyed, and if I'm going to create a video or I'm going to create something, I just want to put my own spin on it. I don't even want to look for a song. Like, I know what vibe I'm going for, so then I'll just try to go create it. It's like the same thing as using Midjourney,
Sick,
Runway,
isn't it?
anything, right? You just want to go and create what's for you. And dude, it's really cool what is coming out of that. Like some of the stuff with Suno too, where it's their newest feature. I think it was like you sing over it, and it kind of like takes your voice and then like dubs it into the song and like makes it a whole like jingle tune. But Yeah, some of that stuff's really funny. You go on Instagram, you see some of the funniest shit. Like some of the songs that people make.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
so
cracks me
creative, right? Like
Yeah.
when I saw the humming to prompting, and initially I thought, wow, that's such a game changer. But for real music geeks out there, the big game changer for me was when Udio gave you WAV stem downloads. Because imagine this, right? Imagine if Midjourney gave you layers. Imagine if he gave you a Photoshop layered thing that you could go and take the background and the character in the foreground and stuff. That's essentially what music got straight away. You know, you could break things down into not just downloading the full MP3, but here's the drums in an individual stem track. Here's the vocals. Here's the guitar or the bass or whatever. So now that, in many ways, music overtook everything else because it got that downloadable thing where you can then go and, like, you know, remix things. So inside a digital audio workstation now, I could use hum to prompt, and I could generate like 20 different things, and I could take a violin from one, a drum track from another, a bass guitar from another, and mash them all together in the background, and then give the output. So it'd be able to, like, mixing Midjourney images together or mixing runway output together in layers. So I really can't wait for that.
Man, never really thought about it like that. That's super dope.
Yeah.
The layers aspect.
the layers piece of it. Is that something you foresee coming through on Midjourney? Do you think people want that? I know we as designers want that, but do you think the audience wants
I
that?
would love it. I think, because they talk a lot about world building, don't they, and being able to actually make like a generative world, whether that comes in the form of a video with layers, whether it's like, a camera panning through and then, I don't know, like, Gaussian splats technology. I wonder if they could involve that somehow. But we've seen a lot of text to 3D coming out. So whether or not it could be like a hybrid between video and 3D in order to make this type of world, I don't know. It would be super cool though, and Midjourney would be really well placed to do it with their like abilities in the image space. It's whether or not it translates to 3D and video as well, I'm not sure. But like layers in general, like the most useful thing that anyone professionally can have. Game changer in any AI stuff, because as soon as you get the ability to take individual components, you no longer rely on everything being coherent from the output.
100%. It's like smart. We've talked about this on the pod before. Like, it was so odd that we were looking at Midjourney, hoping that they would do something similar to Photoshop generative fill with their editor tool, and then like the next week it came out, and we were like, that was weird. But we want that smart select. We want that smart select.
Yeah.
Where then we could almost generate around, because Runway did it in Gen 2, which was interesting. They added that smart select, and you could select multiple different pieces and move them around in multiple different ways. It's not there yet in Gen 3. I'm sure it'll come back. But that was super easy, because then it was like I can keep my one piece of this static, which I don't want to move, and I can make this piece move.
Right.
Like if I want the clouds moving in the sky, right? Like I can have that, but I can keep the the car static over here that I don't want to move because it's parked. So if Midjourney can do something like that, especially layers, if I think they've kicked that around. I've seen the ideas before on the inspiration page or the ideas page, where it's like, can we generate either vector images or in layers? It always has a lot of votes, but I'm guessing it's probably fairly complicated to achieve technologically.
Midjourney is this is speculation, but probably at this point where it's like, how many resources, how much time do we want to spend perfecting the image component versus this progression that's taking place through to the 3D, the video component, which they've expressed is coming up, right? It's coming up. We're supposed to see something with video with 3D by the end of the year. The end of the year is 3 months away, so it's close. Midjourney's also said that this is something that doesn't currently exist in terms of the format. So this is a Nerf Gaussian splatter, but different. This is a totally different type of medium. But I am curious, right? Like how they find this balance of what feels like this is going to keep people engaged with the current state of Midjourney and the images and the consistency and all this stuff versus building for the future stuff. So, walking that balance has got to be tough for them right now, because this feels like sort of that time where you're trying to stroke both things equally, right? Like you're trying to pay attention to both.
Yeah, and I heard rumors that they wanted to get into hardware too, you know, so they're definitely diversified. And I love this magazine that they do. You know, I've been a long-term subscriber of their magazine, so I know that they're definitely thinking, and this is really smart, right? Because I said this about Runway in the early days. I said, if open source catches up to these for-profit technology companies, having communities and filmmaking and other things that they do is actually a very good way to survive. Because you get like people that are brand advocates rather than just someone that will swap to the cheaper, more available open source tool. Midjourney's done a really good job for all of us, obviously, in keeping us keep going on the platform. When Flux came out and everyone goes, "Oh, the Midjourney killer," I said, "Yeah, right, buddy. It's a long way behind Midjourney still."
Hey, Chris, I want to get your thoughts on this really quick. Rory and I have talked about this quite a bit. We make fun of Midjourney in the sense that they're doing marketing in a way that is not typically seen as good marketing, right? Like they do have this community aspect, and it's a little bit of like an ironic thing because they don't, like, with the exception of them reaching out to you via email, which is unheard of.
Yeah,
right?
it's super early days, and I don't think they ever did it again.
They don't really do anything to, like, there's no Midjourney creator program like these other tools. There's no like inner community or influencer aspect, or hey, we're going to reach out, we like that you're creating content for us kind of thing, because a lot of that was like tutorial based and education based and getting people to come over to the platform in the first place. And it's working well for them, right? And so I think you're absolutely right with this community aspect. It's just ironic that they don't do anything on top of that to solidify it.
It's a bit risky, I'm going to be honest. If I'm going to say, like, as an advertising guy, if I take out all of my, you know, love for Midjourney and just analyze this as though I'd never used the platform and looked at its business model, I would say that now they're exiting the Discord era and the user interface and website's going to be the main thing. What they can start to do there is lessen their reliance on the Discord mods, which are the people that they've you know, basically got on board instead of influencers and marketers and creatives, that they're, you know, when the Discord stuff becomes a lot less prevalent to them, they need to shift that attention into the more traditional, like, people like Rory, you know, that have been given the millions and millions of impressions over the year. One of the things that I saw very interestingly when we curated his bird stuff, it went to pages that were 6 to 7 times larger than ours because of how well it performed on our page. So the domino cascading effect upwards and the earned media value would have been in the millions of dollars from that single post, because the impressions would have been in the billions of impressions across 10 to 15 platforms, you know, Reddit, X, Instagram, everywhere. It was literally everywhere it could have been, as though they had done a big brand marketing push. Now, they can't rely on that forever, because Rory will be offered money by people that will be willing to pay for him to do it. And he's been doing it, you know, organically because he loves the platform up till now. But to keep Rory on board and others like him, Midjourney will need to reach out and do this partner program, brand advocate program. Runway does a very good job of this with their partnerships and stuff like that, and others do as well, like you said. So there's no excuses for it, really. They have done well up to now without it, but to guarantee that, you know, Flux and others won't just eat them for lunch, they need to stabilize marketing and advertising and impressions, and really build those bridges with the people that have been so loyal this whole time. Because if they just feel ghosted by them, they will start to leave.
I agree. I think there's a interesting conversation that I want to open up to both of you guys on this one, because it just popped into my head. When we got on the platform, it was really, I mean, it was hard because you had to understand how to text prompt. Now we have so many controls. Does this get harder to bring new users to a platform when we add things like video, 3D, all this different types of technology, because the learning curve is so big? For us, it's easy to learn one new feature because we know all the other features. But is it hard for someone day one to come in and say, how do I start with images? What are the parameters? What are the controls? 3D? How do you do video? Like, there's a lot to learn. As we double down on community, right? I think that's how they're going to win if they want to win, is you have to double down on the community. You have to bring the community together more, whether that be through Discord, live in-person events, different things that they can produce like that. It's just like, does this learning curve become too steep because they're getting too good? It's like that. I think that's a random question. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
It's a great question. Feature overload is always a big issue in AI for me, and the simpler the user interface, the more I get along with it, because you can just learn it quicker. And it is daunting to people, especially now that Discord's no longer a thing. That the user interface on the website's got all these options and drop downs. What would you do to solve that? Would you have the video and stuff separate as a totally separate tool?
I mean, that's a great question. Never really thought about that. I think of the fact that images are relevant to anybody, right? They're relevant to somebody that is not in marketing, somebody that's not in a creative agency, right? Whereas I think video is a little bit more niche, right, in that aspect. Now, would that extend to like marketers, people like me, like looking into it? I think so, right? Because I want to use AI in the mediums that marketing currently uses in an innovative way. And especially if it's a way that's going to save me time, money, or compromises, or make me stand out, right? Because the other part of this equation with AI is you're getting more content now than ever. So how do you stand out? You got to create something that people haven't seen before, or something that's going to shock them, or something that really is purposeful in stopping the scroll. I think that's never been more true, because we're just inundated with content now.
Yeah.
So, if we've heard something or seen something before, it's just going to continue to desensitize. So you do have to figure out those methods. I don't know what Midjourney is going to do with their approach. I have no idea what that looks like, but I am excited for it, because I think for me, whether it's a good thing or not, I am a Midjourney loyalist. It's tough for me to learn too many tools, especially with the other things I have going on. I do see that as a barrier, right? Like people
Definitely.
can only put so much energy into learning new tools, even if they think it's an awesome tool, even if they know that. So I think that component has to be solved for. I agree with you, Chris. Like the lighter weight, the tool in a lot of ways, I actually prefer, because I just know that I know how to do everything within there, and I know what I can use it for, and it makes very clear sense. So I don't know. It'll just be interesting to see how that plays out.
A lot of the new video platforms have done really well with that. I'll give Kling a lot of praise for that. Their interface is so clean and easy to look at. It's so not daunting.
That's interesting, because I think here's how, if I was conceptualizing how to get a new user on, right? Because I do teach a lot of people how to use this thing from day one, but really, like I look at what Runway did on Gen 3, which was not add too many features. They started with you can only do text to video. So I was like, okay, I've never really done that on Gen 2. I only used image to video because I wanted the images that I wanted, but now I didn't have the option. So it was like I had to learn how to text prompt it. And then I was like, okay, that's awesome. I figured that out. Then it's like next they're like, okay, now you can do image to video. I was like, cool. Now I can do what I want to do, but I also know how to text prompt on top of it. Then it was the video to video. It's like, all right, so it's a little tiered approach. So what I think Midjourney's been really good at, they've reached like this sort of either one, like gamification phase with like the style codes, where it's like a little treasure hunt. Same thing with how they tiered the website, where it was like you could only do this if you've done 10,000 images, 5,000, 500, 100, 10, 0. So they kind of like have done a good job of like really opening up the new features to the people that have been using it the most. Maybe it's an interesting way to bring people onto the platform is you have to start with image creation, right? Or like you have to start with image creation, then you can start to graduate. Once you generated 100 images, you can then go to video, then you can go to, I know that's not ideal for maybe like a business model standpoint, but it's a way to like, you have to learn the platform, or like, you know how some tools, like when you get an update, it's like, here, let's take you through each thing. Here's how this works.
They highlight the section and then gray out the rest, don't they? So that you focus on just that like thing. I know exactly what you mean.
My ADHD still hates that.
You get that too.
Hey, okay. Now here's an interesting thought. Okay, Midjourney and all these other tools don't really do this, but if I'm thinking about this from a marketing perspective, it'll be interesting for new users if they provide the use case and a workflow in which you can accomplish that particular use case. So think about Canva, for example, right? By size, that's how they break a lot of these things out. Like, do I need something for social? Do I need something for a LinkedIn banner, right? But the use cases are there. And so what I'm getting at is new users need to be educated on use cases. A lot of these talks that you and I do, it's about how do I actually use this, right? Why would I want to spend the time learning this?
these platforms, what you come to learn, especially if you try to communicate with them, they aren't marketers. They're engineers. They don't think about people's workflows. They talk about tools and features. They don't talk about problem solving. Problem solving is what marketers do. They don't talk about features of platforms, because you don't sell features, you sell problems. Answers and solutions to problems.
So that's the thing, right? We're all early adopters. We can figure out the use cases, and we actually like that. Whereas these people that still aren't on these tools, right, Rory? Going back to your question of does it get harder? That I think has to be almost spoon fed to them a little bit more, and that's just where we're at with I think AI and tech in general. Is like if you like tech and you like new tools, you're on this early and you're willing to go through the bumps, whereas those late adopters, they need use cases, they need the barrier to entry to be lower. They need to understand exactly what they're going to use it for. Yeah.
I think Runway is one of the only ones that's made one of these cool... Did you see their recent Gen 3 video? Someone basically bought a throwaway camera, one of those like disposable cameras that you can buy, and then walked around New York and took loads of photos, and then uploaded those photos to Runway, and then added all sorts of monsters and stuff to them. I loved that as like a use case workflow, because it just shows you need zero skills. You just need fun environments, and you can take still images and add anything you want to them. That really got the message over very simply and quickly in a nice piece of content that they made in-house. But they're the only ones that I've seen do that sort of stuff, where they really think, we know how filmmakers will use this because they'll go and make their own use cases, but we just want new users to be able to feel less daunted about undertaking this.
There was also something really interesting that I saw, which I love. There was, I think maybe Dave Clark reposted it or something like that. There was, someone had produced I don't know if it was a feature length, but a fairly lengthy AI video. And then they got it reprinted on hard copy film stock. And then they had it so it was like remastered in a very analog way. And it just looked really cool. Like it didn't look AI. It looked like someone shot. I mean, you could tell some of the motions were AI, but it still looked like that's a really unique use case that you'll probably see mimicked in the film industry now, considering that you have
that's really smart
tools like Runway, who just made that partnership with Lionsgate, which is, I think, going to set the model.
That's huge.
Right? Yeah, that's huge. That's a massive.
I wanted to talk to you guys about that actually. We discussed that on our podcast. We said, will we ever see anything out of that? As consumers of Runway, will this be something where Lionsgate internally only get their version of Runway? Because when we work with Coca-Cola, this is the thing, they partner with OpenAI and they got a DALL-E 3 built for themselves, but no one has access to it outside of Coca-Cola employees and the partners and agencies they work with like us. So there's no benefit in, the OpenAI Coca-Cola partnership to other outside members, essentially. But is the Lionsgate one going to make the general model of Runway better, as in trained on Lionsgate stuff for users, or will it just be for the benefit of Lionsgate employees? I don't know. I wondered that.
Great question. Yeah.
I was wondering that as well, because I was thinking this is a model, right? It's a model that can be replicated. We saw it with OpenAI, and I think it was Condé Nast, maybe. They got their entire portfolio, and it was like, is that for DALL-E and the images, or is that for the actual copy? Because there's both there. It's interesting. It's like, what is that going to actually, like you put, come to consumer facing where I get to use that, or is that something that is, potentially it could be an interesting structure of the model where they are building one specifically for them, and maybe they're licensing the content as data acquisition as well, so they're paying for it in a sense. So there's a really unique business case to be had from this stuff. It's just how creative are people going to get, because the end, or the commodity for the tools and training is data, right? That's it. That's all it is. Just how do we get more and how do we get better?
That's so true. And outside of OpenAI, I found that a lot of the image and video models aren't being taken as seriously by enterprise. And Runway, I'll give them huge credit for that. They've got Tribeca, they've now got Lionsgate, they're doing all the big official ones, very few people are finding that level of trust in an enterprise partnership. So good for them, for making that legit jump. They've really positioned themselves well as a non-scummy tool, that's ripping ripping people or celebs off. And this comes at sacrifices, as we found out, because they won't allow certain prompts that others will. And this is somewhat to the annoyance of the users that they are basically, filtering free speech or whatever they determine it as. We have less of this talk over here in the UK, honestly, about free speech and advocacy and all of that stuff. But yeah, it is somewhat frustrating in that sometimes you do a runway prompt and you don't even know why it's not worked. It just will not generate. It'll take all of the time to generate and then say it's failed, and then you've got to try again and again and again. But the flip side of that is that they get Lionsgate and Tribeca and other things like this. It's an interesting thing that I'm noticing now is the legit platforms, the AI platforms that don't want to stay underground, and they want these big Hollywood partnerships to do these next level things. I'd love it if we get something out of the end of it ourselves, though, as consumers too. Not just bragging rights for them,
Yeah, when they brought Getty on as a partner,
right?
And then Getty, that was like the ethically sourced sort of
That's
model
big.
training, where it was like, okay, this is all licensed, like this is official, we know where it came from.
That's
You could
big,
just tell
yeah.
from that little move that they were like, okay. And I also got to say, shout out to their CEO when the Sora video dropped. I remember that first thing, probably the most viral marketing campaign of all time. He was just like, game on, and I was like, okay. I was like, all right, he has confidence. So they must have been working on something in the background. But I loved that move because that got me fired up as a weird tech nerd now that I am somehow. But yeah, it's really interesting to see where these all go, because we think about this with dovetailing this back to Midjourney, right? I mentioned this to Drew.
Yeah,
we were like spitballing on what could Midjourney do if they wanted to actually like go and start to monetize some different types of partnerships. It was like, oh, could we create a McDonald's style code where they licensed, McDonald's portfolio, and then we could create a McDonald's style, something like that. Like it's, it's not applicable. It's just a fun idea, but it's like, that's a way to, how do we get more data? You're going to have to partner with the brands, right? But I don't know if they want to do that.
You know what's interesting too is Midjourney's kind of said that they're not, or at least David said, that they're not super focused on the business application for this either.
Know.
Like thinking about business use cases, which to me is just like an eye-opening thing, because that for me as like a marketer on a small team, and I didn't have to choose between stock photography and I didn't have to hire a photographer, and we could create images that were unique, on brand, custom to us, right? I didn't have to have any creative compromises. So if I had this wild idea that we wanted to create, we could create it. To me, to not focus on that just seemed odd, right? And I think that's still something that they bring up from time to time, and I'm not really sure why, but that to me seems like a missed opportunity. I have to know why that isn't the case.
Have you ever heard of Musavir?
Yes.
Yeah, so these guys basically, they built on top of Stable Diffusion, and they built LoRa's on top in order to basically solve business problems. Train your own mini LoRa inside of Musavir and generate from that basically as your like little database. I thought Midjourney could crush it in that department. They'd probably make tens of millions. And it's no surprise, actually, because when I looked into David, he did have a background of, like, was it Leap Motion or something like this? Like, a big previous company. So maybe he's, like, thinking longer term than short term business models for, businesses, and thinking more, how do I get to billions of users consumer wise? It is frustrating to us in the short term who are monetizing it, because that would be such a useful thing, right? Mini LoRa's that we could train for businesses and have like these like, or the personalization token that they give you now, if you could train one of them for each brand and make it do exactly that brand, that would be so useful. Like, the most annoying thing to me is, if David didn't want to do that business model, all he needs to do to open that up is open the API so someone can build it on top. But he's not even doing that. That's the thing that's frustrating, is that, like, fair enough, you don't want that to be your future, but let someone else build it, because it's really, really required.
I think I mentioned this to Drew last time, which was, something that I thought was pretty impressive when I actually thought about it, right? When you're training LoRa's, you can do character, object, style. It was, typically you need 5 to 50 images to train that. With style reference, you can do that with one image. Like, you basically created a functionality that's a LoRa.
That's
with
wild,
just one
isn't it?
image, which is kind of crazy, right? Same thing with character. Once that improves, it's the same thing. Same thing. They'll probably roll out an object reference at some point. But to me, that's also why it's, I thought about trying to comprehend this the other day. I was like, they really just created a LoRa system where you only need one image to reference and you can replicate in perpetuity, which was like the ease of use. Again, take away all the steps, take away the curation, take away the fine tuning, take away all that stuff. And I was like, it's a very simple way. Like we talked about, Drew and I said this last podcast, maybe the one before. It's like Midjourney feels like Mac, and the other stuff feels like PC. Where it was like Mac just kind of makes things easy, right? Fun, a little lighter. PC was like, really, you could do whatever you want, but you got to know what you're doing, kind of thing. So
yes,
it's just,
and it takes a lot more know-how on PC. It's a lot less user experience friendly and stuff like that. I really love the analogy of Mac though and Midjourney, because like think about like the little input that you actually need with those LoRa's for that stylized thing that you're talking about, character reference and style reference, right? I remember when I had to train a voice model for myself, they required 4 hours of reading a script. Then it was like 30 minutes. Now it's 30 seconds. It's gone from 4 hours to 30 seconds, and it does a lot better job of mimicking my voice from that 30 seconds input than it ever did from that 4 hours input. So it's just, scaling and scaling down the requirements for the LoRa in order to get like repeatable outputs. Why doesn't Midjourney make a bigger deal of that? Because they're a bit like, I've never seen a one reference LoRa model anywhere else.
Again, like from a marketing standpoint, if that was me, I'd be like, I'd go try to show you how to train a LoRa on Stable Diffusion and just be like, walk you through the steps and then show you Midjourney. And it's like, oh, it's one button. It's one parameter. Right?
Yeah.
Play against each other, right?
I think that's exactly right. They just don't have anybody marketing, thinking like a marketer in that aspect of communicating and positioning, from that standpoint.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Because Comfy UI is beyond me. Like, I look at all those nodes and think, this isn't fucking art direction, this is fucking dev.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
it looks
that's
like
too
dev.
far for me. Like, it looks like dev, doesn't it? It just looks like connecting nodes between random objects, and that's no longer art direction for me.
It's
totally
a lot.
agree.
It's a lot. I think, that's where art direction, and you said that, Chris, I think it's, we definitely want to ask you about this stuff, because you guys have had... To me, there was a few that always caught my eye. I always remember the variations of the sneakers that you put together, where it's essentially, if I was going to distill it down, it's two unique ideas mashed together perfectly. So there was one that I remember vividly. You guys did it recently. It was for the Olympics, and it was a cone of pommes frites, and it was in the style of an Olympic torch. And I was like, that is just so bam. Like, that's a print ad right there. You probably did it in a couple runs, maybe one run, and that would take God knows how long to conceptualize and come up with for an agency, millions of dollars maybe. But that was, you guys did that, and I was always liked your style of how you've connected two things. Like, I'm actually advertising background, but yeah, if you could talk about that, man, it's really cool, and how
definitely
how you're thinking about it.
So, thank you so much, firstly. That's come through lots and lots of practice, actually. And we used to do this prior to AI. We used to have half an hour set aside from client time every morning to do our own, concept marketing pitches. Because we win all of our clients organically. We don't reach out, through emails or paid media. We essentially put our stuff on social. And if it's big enough, virality-wise, then hopefully they recognize us and reach out. That's our kind of, forte for all of that. So based on that, I'm a very data-driven person, and I like to put into a Google spreadsheet all of those ideal brands that we'd like to work with. So that's column A. And then column B might be, what is a, thing that we think could do well as a marketing campaign for them? And then column C is likely to be, what is the capabilities of, say, Midjourney? Because everything that you want to do for them is not always possible in AI. So you have to do sort of A, B, C in order to make it so that it fully is translatable through a 15-minute workflow of AI in the morning to being what you want. This is great. This guy is so good. So what's happened with Artificial Inspiration now is that it's become a communities page, kind of like this Midjourney magazine, in that, you know, we showcase other people's workflows. Like this guy uses Adobe After Effects and stuff to animate in post-production, and he makes things stand out really well with a title slide that animates, and the rest of the still images. This one's like a visual metaphor pun series that he did, and he's really good at doing stuff like this, as well as doing like awareness for charities and stuff. This guy's completely new to it. This guy is a hip-hop lyricist, one of my best friends from the UK. He's only just got into generating, but he's so good at copywriting and lyric writing that he's a prompt engineer and he didn't even know it. And I thought, how cool is that? Like, he's been writing bars that translate into images now. It's like so cool to see that transition. Yeah. Right now he has a full-time job working in waste management, and I'm trying to get him into full-time AI stuff. This guy's really, really good as well. Mark von Ram, I think this guy is.
And if
hybrid
you guys
stuff.
If you guys aren't following us on video too, on Spotify or YouTube, we're just scrolling through the artificial inspiration page that Chris operates, and so again, we're just scrolling through these images, which are fantastic.
This is
and
exactly the
pointing out
type of stuff
creators.
that Rory was talking about, you know, a hybrid of jet skis and sneakers. You know, they are two not attached things, but they are, you know, got the same sort of aesthetic feel, and so you can see how it matches up as like a collaborative prompt to create. But then it's like figuring out how to make it work comparatively to the idea you had in your head of what it should look like. How do you translate Midjourney to get that output in the same way you would have done through traditional means like Photoshop and stuff like that? So that's really the task for us. I love this series. Yeah, my favorite ones are the Throwback Thursday ones. Yeah, there's something about like 90s prompts in Midjourney, isn't there? And that, you know, they do nostalgia so well. This guy's really good too.
Super dope. Gucci sandcastles here.
Yeah. We got such an awesome crew of people that contribute to this channel now, like, and I really can't give them enough credit. There's about 10,000 of them worldwide submitting stuff to me all the time through the inbox of this theme page, just saying, had this, would you like to feature it? And I always think about, like, have we featured something similar, or have we already got someone that does really good examples? Like Rory, for example, I'll know every new runway update or video update or anything where, like, he's the first one I'll look for. Has he made a creative example of a workflow for showcasing how this can work? Because as we discussed, they're not marketers and they don't think of these things. They just come out with, here's the new feature, and they don't go, here's how it can be used creatively.
It's awesome, man. I appreciate that. First and foremost. The other thing, Chris, and if you want to talk about this, you know, again, I would love to just you know, it's jogging my memory. You guys were early in with some of the companies that were first also interested in artificial intelligence. So like Coca-Cola, things like that. You know, again, yeah, it's something, if you want to talk about that, I think it's really cool for the audience to maybe understand that big brands are thinking about
yeah,
this
for
and have been
sure.
thinking about it for a while. Yeah.
Drew, if you've still got the page up, go back to Artificial Inspiration, because I wrote up a quick newsletter about this. It was the very first edition of the newsletter on Artificial Inspiration, but it was very intentional, actually, Rory, to know that it was Coca-Cola, to know that they were going to be one of the first people to do this, actually. We'd seen the writing in the walls. Where did you get to the newsletter from here? Oh, there you go. Scroll right down to the very, very bottom. All of this newsletter has been generated with Midjourney images, by the way, so it's kind of a progression. That's the one. So in that was Midjourney 1 and DALL-E 1, those images. Scroll down to the... That was it, seeing it in Times Square. It was absolutely incredible. First time ever been to Times Square. There it was, 100 of our generations. And like below, you can see the capabilities of the tool that we actually use, because we showcased the actual 100. That was some of the... There was a Coca-Cola app launched off the back of this. So that was some of the submissions from people that had made it. And there's our 100 bottles there. That post above is exactly how we got the attention of Coke and why I brought you here, basically. This is Paul's idea using that Google Sheet formula we talked about. So Coca-Cola was in column A. Column B was, let's make them into a really, really high-end brand. So make them like crystal and things like this, you know, make like diamond versions. And that was our, and then column C in distribution was, how do we get their attention without tagging them? Because we really didn't want to bother Coca-Cola. We knew lots of people were trying to reach them and trying to do these things. So we just said, we'll just keep going with Coca-Cola ideas until one hits and they can't ignore it, basically. And I had a DM like 2 days after they started to get some really big numbers. And it was Chris Doe, if you guys know who that is, who engaged with it. Yeah, he put it onto Coca-Cola's radar because he's a big design-based person in LA. So his engagement on this post was literally what Coca-Cola told us. Yeah, just so much fun. And this is our 15-minute exercise every day. It's actually so fun. You know, we actually have so much fun taking client time away and just focusing on making concepts that could make us future clients. So it's kind of like we treat ourselves like a client in that respect, you know, and then give ourselves 45 minutes to practice client work that's any concept that we would like for any brand that we're looking to attract. And it has a knock-on effect. Like we did this Adidas Tesla one, and neither Adidas or Tesla reached out, but Puma did. Because they're in the space, you know, and they saw the work, then they were like, oh, that's a really cool concept that we could flip into our branding. So it has knock-on effects, you know, even if you're not getting that exact brand that you're trying to reach out to, you might attract other brands in the same space.
Chris, how are companies like that integrating AI into their creative process right now?
Oh,
what are some of the
man.
projects? You know, like, are there any standout projects? Are there any typical projects or ways that they like to dip their feet in the water? Just paint that picture for us and the listeners here.
Well, Coke, I've got to give them all the credit in the world. When we went to go to Atlanta, I had no idea, but they invented influencer marketing. They actually invented very many forms of marketing. They were the first people in 1940s to put people on like these like trays, but they were like opera singers of the day, you know, holding Coca-Cola bottles. Never before had a brand paid a famous person to hold their products. Never. And so Coke has been on the they've been on the forefront of all of the newest waves of marketing, and they knew that AI was going to be the next one. So they invested big and they invested early. They were the first brand to partner with OpenAI. They were the first brand to partner with NVIDIA. They went really deep as well. Like we're now on the 3rd or 4th edition of their Create Real Magic campaign, which has been the biggest generative AI campaign from a brand yet. And it's basically Christmas card creation given a Coca-Cola app that you can then generate Christmas cards, send them to your loved ones digitally. So this year will be another version. It'll be 3.0 of that. So it'll be the 3rd Christmas in a row that this has been running. And it's going to be bigger and better than ever before. And it's like, can't give them enough credit for how early they are, how much they've invested, who they've brought on board, how they've gone about it. There's many brands out there that should be paying close attention to what they're doing and sort of trying to emulate it in any way they can. Now, they don't have hundreds of millions to spend a month like Coke, you know, like, so I understand that not every brand can be Coke. They're the biggest brand of all time. So like, there's no real like competing with that legacy, but just having that like open-mindedness to all of this and not letting lawyers determine too much and just going with the flow and getting part of the action now will pay huge dividends to having to play catch up in like 12 to 24 months. I can't emphasize that enough. Like if you wait another 2 years, like Rory said, it's already daunting what you need to know now. So, like, imagine when we've got video and 3D world and music and all of this other stuff, we're all completely used to doing that all of the time, and then someone's got to go and start from scratch and try and catch up with all of that. It's almost going to feel hopeless at that point. So, really now is, like, the best time to get involved in AI.
It's cool, man. The stuff you guys did with Coke really, like, caught my eye, because that was interesting. I had, short story. I did a spec ad for Nike like a year and a half ago, and it was on Runway Gen 2.
Nice.
And I knew I was going to ruffle some feathers, right? And it went fairly viral, and it pissed off 80% of the people in the comments. there was one person that like came to the defense, and it was a marketing executive from Coca-Cola, and he's just like, if you guys don't see what he's actually saying, you're going to be in trouble after this. Like really, he's not saying this is an ad. He's saying this is what's capable right now. And I was like, holy, I've never gotten a response like that. So I thought that was really cool. But the other thing that was interesting is Coke on Midjourney always felt like it was the one brand you could put in and always get the logo right. So to me, from like a branding standpoint, right, if everyone starts to know that and then they're sharing their creations, it's just added impression value. Like, it's Coca-Cola. Who's going to steal your brand at that point? Like
McDonald's. McDonald's was easy too. Yeah.
McDonald's was easy too. Yep.
Yeah,
so,
and
same thing.
They're not the easiest logos either, are they? If you think about it,
No.
like Apple or something is a lot easier from like an aesthetic point of view. It's because of probably the amount of images that are proliferated on the internet in the training data sets. So brands that are aware that they are highly, generated should be taking advantage of that. Otherwise, it's just ignoring the elephant in the room at this point, isn't it? It's like, I've seen Louis Vuitton and others like this, just ignore it. And you're like, guys, there's people generating millions of impressions using your branding on concept stuff. Like, you should be seeing this as user-generated content.
They could do exactly what you're doing with artificial inspiration.
Right. Give them a place.
Just as a community. Give
Yeah.
A community where you're sharing images
That's
relative
such
to
a
the
good
brand.
point.
And then people are feeling connected to the brand. I mean, you're going to gain loyalty and trust and have a newfound respect for the brand just by doing something so simple that people are already doing. That's the hardest part. You don't have to convince anybody to do it. All you have to do is create some structure around it, and you get to create that structure.
That's right.
It is interesting that there's really no one taking advantage of that, maybe with the exception of some Coca-Colas, for example. But yeah, it seems like a huge missed opportunity. The other thing I would have to think is going on with some of the bigger companies is they've got to at least be thinking through operations, workflows, how they could use cases, even if they're not already putting anything public or external. They have to be. Because maybe that's the intermediary step, right? Because you have to be prepared for something that is inevitable. This feels inevitable.
I'd certainly say that's been our feedback from the workshops that we've been doing, is people are using it in-house and not talking about it publicly. They're building referral for pitches, they're doing all sorts of social media concepting. That's not actually the stuff that sees the light of day, but all of the, Slack messages and like, here's what it could look like, and all of the pitch decks, that's all being generated without anybody being aware of that's what's happening. But then publicly, no usage of AI. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's safe. It's safe when it doesn't have to be.
It's safe is exactly the word for it. Dave Clark said he's OG enough that he used to get death threats for his concept ads from the advertising industry.
Oh, yeah.
And over time, Dave Clark has been telling me that these same people that were giving him death threats in the early days are now begging him for workshops. The irony of coming full circle to all of that, and being that like bitter, twisted person to the early change, but then recognizing its like strength over time, and it just is so. It's twisted, isn't it? Like, the early days were just so depressing. Everyone was so negative about this stuff. And now as it's improved, everyone's starting to see its possibilities and start to be a bit more positive about everything. But I can't believe it took that. But then looking through history, every major technology change has accrued that. The printing press, hated. The electric guitar, hated. The turntable, hated. All of it. Auto-tune, hated. Everyone hates it initially, and then it just becomes impervious. It's like unignorable. It's mainstream after a while. It's everywhere. Every single pop song uses auto-tune to this day. Just to shift a few notes around. I remember the electric guitar too. I studied this in music. My master's degree was in audio engineering, and when the first electric guitars started going out onto the stage, people said this is no longer music. It's electronified guitars that shouldn't be, and then it went down the rebel route, and then we got rock and roll. And then this is all of the stuff that comes off the back of the backlash of the community, and then they form like underground music scenes and stuff. It's kind of wild how it affects all of this.
It's always
Brilliant.
amazing, the grassroots of all this stuff. It's always these movements. They start small communities. People realize it's cool, gets bigger. It's this stuff. because we're screwing around with it. We're nerding out on it, Drew and I, back in, even when we just started to meet, it'd just be like, just even like in LinkedIn DMs, like, dude, are you getting these kind of results? And it was just like, yeah, this is awesome. And it's like started like, oh, we can't really like talk about this stuff out loud because people are like mad at us for certain things. I mean, even like like going back to that point on what Dave said, I mean, it used to be so much worse. Crazy. Like, oh, you just want to take away, the work of agencies and small businesses. I'm like, no, actually that's the best like avatar to use it because you've never had access like this. And it's never been this cheap.
Do you know another crazy bombshell that he dropped was he said that there are so many pseudonyms being used by major Hollywood directors that don't want to be known for their AI stuff, and that makes a lot of sense, considering that like huge backlash in the beginning. He said that he's one of the only ones he knows that actually attaches his real name towards his AI stuff, because everyone in real Hollywood, writers' strike and all this other stuff, it goes against everything that they're sort of standing up for at the moment. So they're doing it through a totally anonymous pseudonym, which is wild to think about, like how many accounts we maybe follow that are like, Ridley Scott's or people like that, using this tech, but you've got no idea it's them.
It'd be so cool to learn that once it's like comes out after a certain point. But there's a few I didn't know that I know them. They put like Emmy award-winning director or something on there, and then their pseudonym. It's like, oh, okay, like who are you? You start to see that pop up more. But how could you not be curious? Like, especially if you're a producer or a director,
exactly.
How could you not be curious to go in there, even for a pitch of a movie? This is what I'm thinking, right? Like, this is how I visualize it. Can this be done? Can we have the budget for this, right? Like, that to me it's a whole new sales pitch too. But super interesting, where this stuff has gone in 6 months from just even adoption and like a mindset standpoint. Again, crazy. But there is something else that I wanted to ask you about, Chris. I'm just remembering all this stuff now because I think it's useful for our audience to even know that this stuff is available. You guys did an actual in-person art show. Like for Frida Kahlo, was it for that? Was it Miami?
Yeah, that's
something,
right.
If I'm jogging my memory correct? Yeah. Walk us through that for a second, because I remember that a little bit, and I remember seeing you guys taking pictures of it. It was really cool.
Oh, that was amazing. So to cut a long story short, Paul decided, and thank God he did do this, that he was going to make an Instagram page for his own personal Midjourney works. So these were things outside of the enterprise level brand concept advertisings we were putting on LinkedIn, and more traditional like artworks and stuff that he loved. He's really into Marvel and pop culture characters and certain artists, Frida being one of them. And so she had been someone that we'd constantly generated around since the beginning. And someone who, like you said, a Miami-based art gallery owner, reached out to Paul's Instagram page and said, look, we actually work with Frida Kahlo Foundation, like the actual foundation, so we can get the estate's IP rights holders to sign off on a real art exhibition, like in collaboration with the Frida Kahlo Foundation. If you'd be interested in this, I know you've never done work like this because you mainly work with advertising and brands, but would you be interested in this? So it's in Miami right now at the Avant Gallery, and the printing job they did, I can't give them enough credit. By the way, this came at Magnific version 1. Thank goodness for that. Okay. Upscalers had just been basically like introduced at this point, and that really made it so that we could do like 500 megabyte upscales, like much bigger than what Midjourney was giving us, of 100 times bigger than the 5 megabytes we could upscale to in Midjourney, basically. And then when they were printed on like really big like metal canvases, it turns out, they just look stunning. And we were just like, whoa, they've done something special there with the physical printing of an upscaled AI image that made it look even more special than the thing that we sent them. So it was like a combination of things to really make that project special. And now that same gallery is going to be holding our Einstein collection. We reached out to the Einstein Foundation in the same way as Frida Kahlo, and they've just agreed to like having an Einstein art exhibition using the exact same sort of flow and techniques. And so that's really exciting to us as well. It's so crazy, right? They literally said, we want you to be the first people we ever feature in our gallery that's not going to be from a traditional fine arts background. And they're a fine arts gallery, so I was just so honored. At first, like Coke, we had to pinch ourselves and say, is this even real? Is this guy just pulling our leg, you know?
It's amazing, dude. Like, literally, I remember hearing that one. That one, to me, was the most crossover that I could remember from the fine art world and Midjourney, where it hadn't been so contentious. And I was like, oh, that to me feels like a turning point. That I'm sure it's still hated, but, you know, having it right now where that's even a possibility and someone's interested in that, why not? I mean, why can't Midjourney do that either? You know, it's something along those lines where they're doing those types of marketing partnerships or those type of events. But
yeah, it was so flattering, honestly.
It is cool. It's very
super interesting.
Very,
that's something I've done for a few clients now on the art side.
That's really cool.
So the crazy thing with the AI upscaler is you don't even need a crisp image.
No.
Right. So actually, in my first time using that workflow, I got phone pictures
nice.
of a painting. I got phone pictures of a
dope.
painting that I needed to create high res, upscale, do the whole thing. And then, you know, right, you've got this tool like Magnific or Kriya now where you can make that possible, right? Like it's unheard of. And I don't know that a lot of these art consultancies, art providers, curators know about these tools, right?
I'm going to start looking through my 2021 pictures and before, just for the old footage to think about running it through Magnific. That's such a good point.
There's a lot. Midjourney 3, Midjourney 4, some of that stuff, even with the little baseline fractality.
Oh, true.
Yeah, right. Like you could totally transform.
Wow.
Midjourney
Running
4 is
3-year-old
still
AI
soft
images. That's genius too.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, Drew and I talk about this a lot. Like, there's so many lost in like the memory bank. Like, you can't even remember all the good ones. You know, there's so many good ones that you liked, and you just when are you gonna go look back through 200,000 images?
Never see them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's
I
very
wish they'd do a
short-lived.
better way of smart tagging those in Midjourney. You asked earlier about things we'd love to see in Midjourney. The website explore page, sifting through that better, as well as your own gallery and like folders of galleries and stuff like that. That would be really smart if they managed to figure that element out to be able to look. Because are you 100K images in yet? Have you done 100 generations? I'm getting close to it at this point. I think I checked my bash/info or whatever it is through Discord the other day, and it was like 88 or something like that.
You're getting close. Drew's definitely got to be getting close.
I've got 122,000.
122,000. Holy God, you made the 100K club, bro. Congrats.
Yeah.
That's
I thought there was like a
nuts.
special. I thought there was like an
That's
award you
nuts.
get, or there was a private group or something. Guys, there's nothing. There's nothing. Sorry.
They should send you a plaque, dude. That's 100,000
Yeah, like YouTube,
attempts plus getting images.
They're about to expand that batch to.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about.
Heard about that.
So that's gonna happen, but we'll see. Rory, before we wrap this up, man, you got anything else you want to talk through with Chris?
Covered a lot. I think you know, there's a lot to digest here. Chris, glad we got to go through the Coke stuff, because that was something that I think if anyone here is listening and you're using AI, and whether you're on the brand side or on the creator side, that's not an experience that many people have. So that one is awesome to bring the audience. Glad you were, appreciate you sharing that too, because there's some people who probably wouldn't want to talk about it. But
people are doing this shit, and, and if
Mm.
nothing else, like you're seeing a guy like Chris and Paul, and right, like they jumped in and now they're reaping the benefits, right? It's the consistency, it's the the willingness to adapt with the tool. It's all the things that we're talking about. And if you didn't know this was possible, guess what? It's possible, right? And that's why I think sharing these experiences with you guys in terms of the speaking engagements that, Rory just had a speaking engagement, the clients we work with, the use cases, the partners. This is important because it's not necessarily us sitting up here bragging. It's that this is happening and you can be a part of this. So
there's so many ways
Chris,
to do it, isn't there? Like, I've seen people doing t-shirt businesses. I've seen people doing digital downloads. I've seen people doing workshops, keynote speaks, like you said, client work. There's just so many ways to monetize this. So yeah, I'm glad that we can be like a nice example example of someone that should never have got an enterprise brand, because we're a two-man band, you know. Like, we went into that referral for pitch against Coke with like agencies the size of a small city here in the UK. You know, they have thousands of employees, and then we somehow won against them to be able to work with them long term as like a contracted partner. So that was something even different, because initially it was just that, you know, do this piece of AI work and we'll see how it goes. And then now we're like signed on officially to the Coca-Cola roster of agencies to work with them constantly on this stuff. But yeah, if someone working out of their spare bedroom at home and just doing 30 minutes of creative ideas in the morning can do that, then yeah, there's so much that can be achieved through these platforms. Really, it's like you're limiting yourself by creatively not thinking of outside the box about how you can monetize it. That's the big thing for me.
I mean, the hardest thing, I think, is just focusing in on one or two things that speak to you, because there are so many different ways that you could apply, you know, the AI stuff, right? You're seeing this take place in all these different verticals, all these different industries, and all these different types of use cases. So there's something out there for you. As we wrap up this episode, want to say thanks for joining us. We had a great time with our boy Chris, first guest on the podcast, Midjourney Fast
Let's
Hour.
go.
So we're excited about that.
Boom.
And it was no doubt filled with a ton of great info. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next one.